Ironically, the Republican Party today has, well, I think I'd have to call it a Reagan problem. And what I mean by that is that so many on our side, and I'm not, again, talking just about the rhinos, the moderates, I'm talking about mainstream Republicans who continue to pine for something resembling the Reagan era. Let's say a kinder, gentler America that we used to live in the 1980s and continued to a point in the 1990s and somehow seems to have disappeared. We want that America back. Now, look, I came of age in Reagan's America. I was in college in the early 80s when Reagan was first elected. I found myself thrillingly in the Reagan White House in the last 2 years of the Reagan administration. It was such an honor for me to work there and to be up close watching Reagan. I didn't interact daily with Reagan, but I got to stand in the back of the room and observe Reagan, his style, his sense of humor, and how Reagan's leadership in action. And it was a great time to be young and a great time to be alive. And of course, the results of the Reagan administration were downright spectacular. I remember in 1982, this is when the country was in a recession. Sam Donaldson, then of ABC News, confronted Reagan, and Reagan had given a speech, and the country was in bad shape. And Reagan had given a kind of thunderous Reaganite oration, and Sam Donaldson said, "Mr. President, in your speech, you have blamed the Democrats, you have blamed the economists, you have blamed the media. Does any of the blame belong to you?" And Reagan goes, "Well, yes, because for many years I used to be a Democrat." And this was great because Sam Donaldson chuckled, he laughed. It was almost like one of those mic-dropping moments. And you could see the camaraderie between Reagan and Donaldson, even though they were clearly on opposite sides of the aisle. Reagan even had a pretty good camaraderie with Tip O'Neill. I mean, Reagan would call him, Reagan said that Tip O'Neill was like the government, big, fat, and out of control. So he would have these jibes at O'Neill, and there was political combat between the two. But at the same time, you got the feeling, I don't know if they actually did this, but that they could, in fact, go out and have a Guinness together. Reagan had come to power by defeating Carter. And Carter was, a massive nincompoop, a complete dolt, and someone who had not anticipated the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. He seemed really surprised when that happened. He didn't anticipate or know what to do with escalating gas prices. He didn't know how to handle OPEC. Here's a guy who was completely puzzled when his lack of support for the Shah of Iran resulted in the Ayatollah Khomeini coming in and imposing a draconian regime across the whole country. Carter was like, what? He was constantly surprised by events. And you got the feeling that you have a total buffoon. Finally, when the hostages were taken, he didn't know what to do. So in a sense, the Democratic Party of that time was defined as a party of nincompoops, a party that didn't know how to manage the economy, didn't understand the Soviet Union. But see, today, the Democratic Party is totally different. We're not dealing with the problem of ignorance. We're not dealing with nincompoopery. We're dealing with gangsterization. In short, we're dealing with a trend in the Democratic Party that began with Obama, has continued through Hillary, all the way through Biden and all the Obamaites who are around Biden. So we are not in the Reagan era anymore. And this is the beginning of political wisdom to recognize that we are now in a different situation. We are in a domestic Cold War, not against an external Soviet Union, but against an implacable, in some ways more dangerous domestic opponent. And that calls for new approaches and new strategies. Another way to put it is that in the 1980s, and you could say that this is true all the way going back, certainly as far back as World War II, Republicans and Democrats in the past agreed on goals, but disagreed on means. If you had said to Republicans or Democrats, let's say in the 1950s or 60s, or even in the 1980s, I want an America that's strong. Sure. I want an America that's prosperous. Sure. I want an America that's an example to the world. Sure. I want an America that is that respects and takes pride in its founding and in the historical unfolding of the extension of the franchise and liberties to more and more people. Sure. And I want to raise young people with civic knowledge and civic virtue. Sure. So the disagreement might be, how do we split the pie? And there were disagreements about how to go about confronting the Soviet Union. But as I say, those are disagreements about means, not about ends. What's different now is that the Democrats and the left want to take us to a different place. It's almost like we want to go to Florida, they want to go to Maine. And so in this sense, this is not an argument about how to get there. This is an argument about where do you want America to go. They don't like the idea of American strength. They don't like the idea of American prosperity. They don't like the idea of America being an example to the world. So they are out to dismantle and undo and remake America. And they're willing to use force. They're willing to use all kinds of tactics to make us succumb to their America. And the only question is, will we do it? And if not, how will we fight it?